see if we can make this thing light up a little bit. Per twang. There we go. We're live. It is it's like 10 in the morning. 10 o'clock. How's everybody doing? Today we want to talk about specific outputs. More specifically, I have a 1970 454, which is going to be an LS6 buildup, which was rated at 450 horsepower in 1970. It's kind of the big boy of the big blocks. And I know people are going to put in comments, oh, what about the LS7? Because, we know an LS7 is one more than an LS6. But that was never a factory motor. It was actually never offered in any production vehicle. The LS6 was offered in intermediate cars. So, in fact, it was supposed to be offered in the Corvette in 1970, but it did not get that. In 71, they did get it, I think, in the Corvette. But I'm building a 1970 version, and it will not be, although it would be cool. I would love to get my hands on a set of L89 heads and install those. That would be cool. I kind of would like to do same thing I did on the LT1 when I did that. I made a 70 and 71 version, although the 71 version wasn't completely accurate because I didn't change both the pistons and the cylinder heads. I just changed the cylinder heads. And we needed to do both. It needed to have slightly less compression. Oh, I think I lost all my power here. Oh yeah, we're out of juice. But I'd like to do the same thing, but I'd like to do it with the L89 engine option, which is an aluminum head option on the LS6. So that would be kind of cool. And it was also available on the 396. So that's what I want to talk about today. Is we want to talk about the specific outputs between the L78, which is the 375 horse 396, or 425 horse 396 if you happen to have a 65 Corvette, and the specific output of the factory 1970 LS6, which is 450 horsepower. My question for you guys is, and this will probably be the poll, and I'll write this up in just a minute, but this will be the poll. If we run essentially the LS6 and the L72 427 in between these two, and then also the L78 375 horse 396, they all had the same cylinder heads, camshaft, aluminum high-rise intake manifolds, 780 Holley carburetor. So they all had the same components. They had the same static compression. They had a higher dome piston in the 396 than the others because they had more displacement. But they all had the same versions. A lot like on the small block side, they all used the same, essentially, Fuelie heads. They had different casting numbers, and the experts want to bicker back and forth about that. The reality is they all flowed the same. There's probably more of a difference on the Fuelie heads between the individual versions of the same castings, and then how they were prepared or how the core shift and all that stuff, rather than the difference between the different casting numbers. So the same thing with the different versions of the rec port heads, of the factory rec port heads, for the big blocks, closed chamber rec port heads. So my question is this: if we run these same things on the 396, and we run these same components and same configuration on the 454, we would expect the bigger motor to make more power just because it's bigger. But would we? My question is, what do you guys think? Do you think that they would make the same power? Would they make the same power, but just at a different engine speed? So with the bigger motor, would they both make 425 horsepower, 450 horsepower, whatever the number is? Just do it at a different RPM range. So the 396 make it at a higher engine speed than the 454 would. Or would the bigger motor just make more power because it could take advantage of the things that are there where the 396 couldn't? Like, for instance, we know that when we run an LS3 motor and run it with the factory heads, that in stock form, it can't anywhere near take advantage of what those heads have to flow. And it's the same situation here with big blocks. A set of rec port heads flows way more than enough to support the power level of either one of these motors. In fact, you can make a lot more power with a factory rec port head than any of these factory motors are making. They also have enough static compression. They also have pretty good sized camshafts. You can make way more power with those factory camshafts. So my question is, in a situation where we have more than adequate cam timing, cylinder head flow, the dual plane intake manifolds can certainly support more power. The 780 Holley is not holding things back. When we have a situation where we have more than enough stuff there, do we get just more power from the big block, from the bigger version of this big block? Do we not get it from the small block? I'm just curious what you guys think. What do you guys think is going to happen? I'm wondering if you think that they'll make near the same power, or if the bigger one will just make more. Will they have different specific outputs? Like, will we see the exact same thing? Like on 396, we see that a 375 horse 396, if you go by the factory power ratings, I already know it's not going to do that. It's going to make more power than that. It's going to make more power than that the way that we run it on the engine dyno. But if you go by that, power output and that displacement, the specific output is like less than 1 horsepower per cubic inch. It's 0.95 horsepower per cubic inch. If you go by the 425 horsepower number, it's 1.15 horsepower per cubic inch. The big block is also less than 1 horsepower per cubic inch, according to the factory rating, because it was rated at 450 horsepower. A 450 horsepower 454 is 0.99 horsepower per cubic inch, or almost right at 1 horsepower per cubic inch. We're only missing it by 4 horsepower there. So what do you guys think? I mean, like I said, either one of these are going to make more power the way that we run it on the engine dyno, especially if we're going to run it with stock exhaust manifolds, but we're also going to put headers on it. And I assume that it's going to make more power the way that we run it. They wouldn't have run it back in the day with electric water pumps. Even in the gross rating that they were doing before they switched over in the early 70s to a net rating, which was more likely what it's supposed to be, more with all the factory accessories and stuff, kind of the way that it is in the car. And we don't run it that way, but they would have run it, even in the gross rating, they would have run it spinning the water pump with a belt. I'm pretty sure. If somebody knows different, please let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that they just hooked up a single belt to the water pump. And I'm told by some of the old timer guys that they would have run those with headers too, but I don't know that that's the case. I sure would think that they would have used stock exhaust manifolds, because they had those. Otherwise, they would have had to have different headers for different configurations. And I think that they would have just run stock exhaust manifolds and hooked it up. And that's the way that their dyno was, because they were OEM and they had all that stuff. But I'm just wondering, if we run the 396 with all of these components, are we going to see that it makes more horsepower per cubic inch than the bigger motor does? Because if they make the same power, one of them makes more horsepower per cubic inch. If they don't make the same horsepower, are they going to make the same specific output? Like, are they both going to make 1.1 horsepower per cubic inch, and the 396 is just going to be lower than the 454 is? Is the 454 just going to be better everywhere? we do have one issue going on with the 454 with the LS6. It came with a low rise intake manifold, where the 396 was a high rise intake manifold. We might see something there. I'm going to try to test both of them when I have them on the dyno. But right now I'm putting the 454 together. The first thing I have to do is paint the block. All the machine work's done. I'm going to chase all the threads. I might even do like Gliptol on the lifter valley and stuff on this one, and on the front, behind the timing cover. I might do that. I'm not going to do the underside of the motor. A lot of guys do that. The guys at West Tech have done that on a lot of their builds, and the motor looks fantastic when the block is there by itself. It's painted Chevy orange on the outside. It has a Gliptol everywhere on the inside to help oil drain. Personally, on the inside, on the underside, I think that I think that adds a covering for. I think that stops the cooling a little bit, and you guys let me know what you think about that. But I like the idea of having it in the lifter valley, so we get, it's to kind of improve oil drain back. But it also looks nice. So that's a good enough reason for it. So when people see your engine and it's open while you're putting it together, they're like, oh yeah, that looks really good. And it does. So that's what I'm going to be doing, but I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with the different power outputs. I like comparing stuff like that. You know, it's cool to put the motor on the dyno and run it and go, hey, it makes this much power. But I like going beyond that and testing different things like the headers versus stock exhaust manifolds. What happens if we put different intake manifolds? What happens if we step up in to modern camshafts, or at least different camshafts than factory camshafts? And then we have lots and lots of data to talk about. And that's kind of why I do this, because this is my jams. So we're gonna go put our poll up. Okay, well, the stock L78 375 slash 425 horsepower 396 make the same horsepower as the stock LS6 450 horsepower 454. 454. Hopefully everybody can see the poll. Getting toward the end of October. Halloween's coming up. Oh, pretty close in 2 days too. I say split the difference 427. I like to do a 427. I would really like to do an L88 build, or at least an L72 with L89 heads on it. I think that would be the aluminum head. I'd like to get a set of L89 heads, but they're so hard to come by. Would it be okay if I press the like button? Yeah, it's highly recommended. Anybody else having buffering issues? Uh-oh. I was, but I forced stop and reloaded. Good. That's right. You got to reload. Smooth on my end. Turbo Central, what's going on? I think the main difference between the two is going to be torque. There'll definitely be a torque difference. Depends on head flow. Well, the head flow is the same. Both of them have the same rec port heads, so the head flow is identical. Head for head, I think 396 would need more cam to make the same power. Cubic inches make power. Teaches big block. Big block. These are expensive big blocks. So on a slup, a set of twin 78, 75s with fuel injection on 396. That would be good. But it needs to it would need to have aluminum heads on it though, and not have big dome pistons on it. Normally I'd be super excited about big blocks, but today has been a dud for me with mine 1972 LS5. It was last run in 2004. I regasketed everything that needed it. Fresh oil and plugs. So is it running now? Didn't see Relay just dyno an NOS LS7? He did. But it was not stock though, right? It was a tunnel ram or something. I know he didn't even tell me about that. He didn't even call me and say, "Yo, Richie, what's up? Look at that. We got an LS7," which I think is kind of awesome. I think the 396 will run as good as the 454. You have torque curves, Coyote versus 5.8 versus 5.8 supercharge for a tow pickup project. I do. I have a stock Coyote versus 5.8. I don't know if I have 5.8 stuff. I definitely have 5.4 NA stuff and 5.4 supercharged stuff. And of those, a 5.4 supercharged deal would be much better than a Coyote. Although if you're talking about a supercharged Coyote, I also have supercharged Coyote stuff. It's not cooperating. Oh, the engine's locking up. That's not good. The peanut ports on a 396 make people sad. No, it would. Peanut ports will support a pretty good bit of power, a lot more than people think. 427, 454 have an advantage. Larger bore unshrouding the valves. The 396 has the notch in the bore for valve unshrouding, although it's not the same. Maybe a 5.8 valve and a V10 to starting from. They didn't make a 5.8 liter 3 valve. They made a 5.4 3 valve. I think a 396 will make more horsepower per cubic inch, just like the DZ302. I think it makes more power though. The LT1 has had a smaller camshaft in it. It would have been interesting. I wish now that I would have run the LT1 with that bigger 302 cam in it, because that factory 302 and the 365 horse 327, they shared the same camshaft, but the LT1 got a much milder camshaft. Everything is the same except for the cubic inch. Torque would be increased, especially if the heads were maxed out. The heads are not maxed out though, and that's the important point of all this, is that there's way more head flow than we're making power here. So that's what lends me to believe that it may not turn out the way that we think. Different RPM means different cam. Top horsepower could be close, but torque will be different. Yeah, the 396 is definitely going to make less torque. That's what I was saying. If it makes the same power, if they both made, let's say, 450 horsepower, but the 396 did it at 6,400 and the 454 did it at 5,900, let's say. Wasn't the 454 underrated with a bigger cam? The LS6 has the same camshaft as the 396 does. 1977 half-ton 4x4 LS6 big block with a 200 shot. What truck would smash street cars? That truck would smash street cars in the 8th. Yeah, a nitrous LS6 big block would be good. All big blocks have notches. I put 156 peanuts on my 402. Runs good enough for my purpose. Yeah, I've run 454s and stuff with peanut port heads on them, and they ran good. In fact, I want to do something with what is it? Who's the Vortec guy? Is it his name is Mark? Maybe I'm trying to remember his name. We wanted to do something together where we made 600 horsepower with a set of peanut ports. Because I've done over 500. I've done 530 or 540, I think. And I think that that's possible with ported versions. So go jump over to live chat. Our poll is trending 77%. Will it make the same power? Most people are saying no. Mark Jones, that's who it is. Yeah, I spoke with him. We spoke at length. He's a good guy. Vortec Pro. Specific output, one of my favorite subjects. I spent hours messing with specific output and looking at where peak power is made with certain cams and heads to extrapolate horsepower. A lot of the Coyote guys were getting wrapped up in specific outputs. And the 5.3 guys, and whatever we can complain about, we complain about. It's all good though. It's all good. That's why we do it. So we can complain. I think he moved from Colorado to Texas. I haven't spoken to him for a while. But he's put together some good combinations. Yeah, he's done some good porting, although I don't envy a guy doing porting on iron heads, man. Is there a difference in compression ratio between the 454 and 396? There's not. They're both 11-to-1 from the factory. It's just that the 396 has a bigger dome in order to achieve that static compression because it has less displacement. Done a few different 454s in our boat. The 990 head, rectangular tunnel ram setup did good on the higher RPM stuff. Yeah, tunnel rams work good, and they work better than most people think. Did you run 660s on that? 660 center squirters? Pretty common on especially OG tunnel ram stuff. They're pulling these options for I don't know. It's just guess, man. It's all good. There's no wrong answer. Because by the time we have the answer on that, everyone will have forgotten about the poll. And you could just say, look, oh yeah, I nailed that. That was perfect. Yep, 660 center squirters. The OG tunnel ram carb. Raised big blocks at the track. None of them have beat my head cam intake LS2. Head cam intake LS2 could be around 600 horsepower if you have the right things done to it. 396 with a set of cheap Speedmaster heads, help it or hurt it. You know, I've got such different results from the Speedmaster stuff. Some of them were decent and some of them were not. I don't know that a stock ASCAS Speedmaster head is maybe going to be a whole bunch better than a factory Recport head, but I'd like to test it. If I remember right, if you're speaking about big head tests, you did one with magazines. It made 511 with peanut ports. We made more than that with one of them, I thought. I think the horsepower per displacement is the go-to excuse for all smaller displacement to bigger displacement losses. So that's what they talk about. Specific output is important, especially as it pertains to like class racing. So if you can't put a 6 liter and you have a 5 liter displacement limit, having the specific output higher in a 5 liter deal is it's an important thing. Like when you were Trans Am racing back in the day. Sean, so you need the shorter injectors for your fast intake manifold. So then I would get fast injectors. Or other people make the short ones, but I don't have enough experience with putting those shorter ones in or testing a bunch of different versions. Whenever we would run, I actually run those bigger ones in the fast. We just raise the rail up with spacers. It's not ideal because and especially if you're using the fast rails, which I don't like, unless you're using them with the correct injector height, because the fast rail, the recess and the stop for the injector, either one is too deep and allows the injector to move around and unseat the O-ring, or it's not deep enough and it's very easy for the O-ring to come out. So I really think that they need to redesign their fast fuel rails. Fast 85 pounds are out of stock. Do they have something bigger? You can always go with something bigger because you're going to tune it anyway, so you can take fuel out of it. %78% are saying no. $80 pounds lighter, I think, might go the Speedmasters. Okay. The other ones I would look at are like the Skip White stuff, or even what are the ones I think that they're in Arizona? The Pro Max stuff. I've had good luck with those. One thing I was wondering about with that head test is that you said those peanut ports were ported. You've always said they weren't. Maybe there are 2 different sets of heads you tested. I would have to go back and look at the data. Definitely don't want to do spacers. Glad to know there's a technical reason. I just thought it would work. Yeah, definitely look at the rails. I think you can run I think we had better success on the fast running the tall injectors because we just did that on the 5.3. So we ran the long injectors like those Deca 80s on the fast manifold, but we did it with a factory LS3 fuel rail. And that worked a lot better because there's a lot better engagement for the O-ring and the injector on the factory rails. than there is on the fast rails. And then we're able to space the rail up with spacers that work pretty good if you use that rail. I don't have the factory rail. Yeah, in fact, I need an LS3 fuel rail. If anybody has one, let me know for something that I'm doing. The LS3 rail that I had, Brian sent it with that fancy I don't know if it was dipped or wrapped carbon fiber wrap manifold that he had that he sent that was port matched, and I just sent all that stuff back to him. %79 no, so the no's are inching up a little bit. I know where to get LS3 rails, but I'm not sure that people would sell them cheap. Where, I mean, I would buy them as long as they're not ridiculous. 85 pounds seems like the biggest they make in that style. I never have Gen 4 stuff, let alone LS3. I know the LS3 stuff is the LS3 intake manifolds are obviously desirable, and the rails are too. Same thing with the rails on a Trailblazer SS. For some reason, those seem to be hard to get to. With the 396 live video, does this mean you have a big block video coming out soon? The next big block video that comes out will be the 396 running on the dyno. That's the next one I'm putting together. The 454 is probably not going to run for a little while. I have a 390. I have an LS3. I'm looking to do a Texas Speed Cam 229, 244. Do you think I could run 1.8 rockers without any piston to valve clearance? I do not recommend rockers, and you already have enough lift with that camshaft. I don't think it's going to benefit you, and I think it could potentially hurt you. So I don't recommend a rocker change. I recommend running stock rockers on that. You have much more issues and problems with valve float, and the rockers are not going to appreciably change piston to valve clearance anyway. So if you want to run them, you certainly can. You have enough piston to valve clearance. That's determined by the intake duration. I think a guy just broke the stock LT block record with an engine BTR supplied. The LT motors can make a lot of power. Live feed's not good today, Ryan. What's going on? Is it buffering or something? What's it doing? The interesting thing on the big blocks is that like these numbers that we're talking about with a 396-inch motor, it's making 1 horsepower per cubic inch. If you put together a 396-inch LS motor, you'd be pretty disappointed if it only made 1 horsepower per cubic inch. Richard, did you ever do a storage unit clean out? No, I need to do that out of both of them. Building a 57 Dodge Town Wagon, a C4 vet frame. Oh, that's pretty enthusiastic. My question: would a tunnel around with 2 4-barrel cars be a good option for a mildly cammed 454? It will definitely work. You use a high ram with their dual quad top, and it will look cool. You'd have a better power curve if you just put a fast on it, but that will definitely work, and it will look cool. Perhaps folks should upgrade to something better than a potato for internet. But you can plug those in and run light bulbs and stuff, right? Richard just popped in from my priming speakers. I'm making 8-inch book shelf, big ones for that old Scott boxes, new drivers, tweeters, hopefully. Okay, so you're doing some sort of speaker boxes for stereos, right? Is that what I'm getting out of that? My dad had an LS6 Chevelle that ran 1080s at 128 on slicks and some magic mechanical work. Yeah, it would have taken a little bit. That's 10s is pretty fast. Yeah, overbuilt. It's ridiculous how, especially one of them is not bad. One of them you can walk in, and I have shelving and stuff on it. The other one needs shelving. I just need to either put it together or buy some. He said it was way faster than the 396. Is there a better rail I could switch to where I could use the longer injectors? It seems to be the short injectors or an Obtanium. Just get a factory LS3 rail. Nick, I'm swapping out my LS3 fuel rails for Holly. If you're interested in my stock rail, I am. Let me know what you want for it. I need a stock rail. Actually, I need to send an email over to Brian to see if they have one laying around other than the one that he had on his thing. I'm going to use that for my top secret Richie project. Top secret fueling. Top secret in plenum fueling. That's never been done before in the history of the automotive kingdom. Except like all the time. How's our poll doing? 78%. You guys got snow in Colorado? It's been getting colder here, but not snow cold though. Just like, 60s. I know I got to get this LS6 block painted before it gets too cold. I like doing it when it's sunny. Yeah, 42, Sean, is not going to get you very far. You could get to 700 or more probably, but are the 42-pound injectors that you have like factory LS3 injectors? You got some Pico de Gallo injectors? Typing fast. Okay. I returned 2 Speedmaster intakes due to severe restrictions in some ports. Looked like the CAD design for those was heavily intersected. So they actually had problems in the ports. I've run their manifolds before. We had pretty good luck with their manifolds. And it gets harder and harder on some of these big block things to find stuff. The heads are particularly expensive. You can find them, but they're expensive. But then the other problem you have, like with the one set of heads that I had, they leaked water and then a valve guide dropped in them. I mean, they're, these heads come from the 60s, so they've been around a long time. Overbuilt. So you're doing a video on your speaker configuration? Coolio. Brulio. Wow. That looks an awful lot like a doesn't that look like a look like a ZL1 Camaro? It's even got the like hood deal on there. Bear. I'm real curious to see, because we had some before on the 396 before we made started loading it, and made some preliminary power pulls with timing nowhere near where it's supposed to be, and just like like we do, we start out really conservative, and right now it has that comp cam in it because I'm going to put the stock cam back in it, but but it's making pretty good power. Is there a certain LS53 that makes 500 horsepower on a poor man's budget? Yeah, one with a turbo on it. You have to add boost to it to do that. Otherwise, 500 horsepower requires all of the things. It requires ported heads, in our case, milled heads too, which you could port and mill the stock ones, but you have to do a really good job on them. And then an intake manifold, like a Fast or the Brian Tooley Racing one or a High Ram or something, and then a pretty good sized camshaft in there. I have 42s in my head cam intake LS6. I'm at the edge for duty cycle. Yeah. 85 in Central Florida. Yeah, I was down there not long ago, and it seemed like that's where it wanted to be day or night every day. 87 yesterday. Even when we were doing the snake hunting at 2 or 3 in the morning, it was in the 80s. 901. If you're putting the 823 heads on your 6-liter with a turbo, you don't really need to do anything as far as porting. You just need springs for whatever camshaft that you have, and then just put them on and then run the right intake manifold with those heads. And then your turbo, if you have a 76, 75 precision, you can max that turbo out pretty easily with that combination. For a poor man's 500 horsepower, check out Sloppy Don't BS Me build. Yeah, it would be a VS Racing 78, 75 turbo and a cam and stuff. 42-pound injectors will support 672 horsepower if you use the multiplier that I have, and they'll actually support more than that. So you should be able to support that much power. You could make 700 with 42-pound injectors on an NA motor, not on a boosted one. You 901, you could put a stock LS3 intake manifold on there. Would be your best bet if you have one of those, or even the truck version, which is like an LY6. Either one of those intake manifolds will work and make enough power. I use your 428 horsepower Gen 6 big block video for my specific output of my 489. Okay. I think the non-marine 8.1 liter truck injectors are 30 pounds. We took some of those out. I don't remember if I flowed them or not. I don't think we did. I don't remember checking them to see if we. I need to go back and look. I need to see. We may have run the stock injectors on that just when the motor was stock. Red box intake is great on a budget like the Sniper style. I have a stock LS3 intake. Yeah, if you have a stock LS3 intake, then that's perfect. Because the LS3 intake manifold, you won't pick up any power with a fast manifold from the LS3, certainly not on that combination. And the turbo is going to dictate ultimately what kind of power you have. So all of those things will work fine. The Trailblazer SS one. Yeah, not a Trailblazer SS, because a Trailblazer SS is a cathedral port one. But if you have the Recport version of that, which is an LY6 or other variants that were truck versions of that, but Recport, that will work fine. It makes the same power as the LS3 does, as long as you can fit that manifold, which is kind of tall. But that's why a lot of guys go with the LS3 just for hood clearance. But when I tested those back to back, and I've done it 4 times now, I think they have the same power curve, so one of them wasn't different than the other. Yeah, you don't 901. You don't need to do anything to the heads. The heads already flow enough to support way more power than you're going to make. That turbo is going to dictate what the power output is. 60s would be enough. 960 horsepower NA. So that's more than enough. I don't think your thing was boosted, right? $730. Yeah, if it's an NA motor, 60-pound injectors will be fine for that power level. In fact, even 50s would be fine because you can make 800 with those. And even more than that, because your brake specific is going to be better than 0.5. 0.5 is kind of a generic number, and most motors can do a 0.5 brake specific NA. LSs tend to be more in the 4s. I want to make sure I'm not sitting at 90% duty cycle. I wouldn't worry about that. Will factory fuel rail support 900 horsepower? Very easily. Richard, do you like turbo exhaust out the fender? For a street application, I don't think that's going to, I would be worried about driving next to the local constabulary, what? 50. I'd be worried about that. Tom, I don't know about PRI yet. I'm at 108% of my 26-pound injectors. Well, we ran those 24-pound injectors at 100 PSI at, I'm sure, more than 100% duty cycle on the 5-liter Mustang at the Silver State. So they'll do a lot. I honestly don't understand. Like it makes me mad that that the way that they have the thing configured, that you could get to more than 100% duty cycle. You shouldn't be able to do that. You should only be able to get to 100%. 100% should be all of it. Like you shouldn't be able to go to 11. You should only be able to go to 10. And I understand why that is, but I want them to recalibrate that so that 100% is all the fuel that the injector will support. Because that should be all of it, right? I hate the idea of pushing things to the point where failure is more likely an expensive engine option. I don't think you're going to worry about that. I think that you see online that there's a lot of this thing, well, you shouldn't go over 80% or 85% duty cycle. That's nonsense. Lots of people are doing that. It's the same thing with, I'm only going to run 7 pounds. Yeah, you're going to run 7 pounds until you eventually turn it up, because you're definitely going to do that. And for and for most people, pretty quickly after you run 7 pounds. You're going to run more than that. So we'll close our poll out at 79% that we think that the bigger motor is going to make more power. I think that that's usually a safe bet. Although I want it to be, we want it to be something unique. I want the 396 to be magic, and although it is going to be limited by airflow, I think, not airflow from the head. And see, that's the other thing is like on that small motor, small displacement 396, it has excess head flow. Even though it's limited in head flow by the bore size, it still has way more head flow than it needs to make power. Like it has more than 600 horsepower worth of head flow. And it's a 375 horsepower motor. So it's got way more than it needs. Larry, you vote no, you're late. Okay, so you think that the bigger motor is going to make more power? That makes sense. The other thing on these big blocks, especially the 396, that people pointed out is that's the wrong color small block Chevy or Chevy orange, and it was. I didn't realize it. Well, it looked awful red. I liked it. I liked it better than the orangey orange one. This is a reddy orange, and it says Chevy orange on it, but it's not. It's definitely different than other Chevy oranges. So I repainted it actually with a duller orange color. Unless it's a 2JZ that it makes all the power. That's right. They're magic. Red is better than orange. I agree. Reloading. I don't know if I'd have to. I think on some of the head tests, some of the Edelbrock heads were 60 horsepower better than a Gen 6 head. Although I don't remember using Gen 6 heads as the base. I don't think we used a Gen 6 head for any of the bases for any of the big block Chevy head tests. The red definitely looked better. I mean, the engine looked better painted that color than it does the orange color. But if you're going to make it look like it was originally, then you should do the right color. The nice thing that the Gen 6 heads have going for them are very, very small combustion chambers, 102 cc's. The first 5.3 bill, is there a particular year that's better for boosting? The Gen 4 stuff, it tends to have more strength, but I don't know how much power you're trying to make. Any of the 5.3s will make the power that you're probably trying to make. Sean, multiply the flow rate times 16. It's really simple. 2JZ swapped Freightliner. I don't know that I would pick a 2JZ for my heavy hauling. But it is turbo. Yeah, Sean, for an NA motor, if you just multiply the flow rate of the injector by 16, that's for a V8. And it's pretty simple math. Pretty simple. So now I need to go down and get some. I need to bring the can with me that I have and go down and make sure that I don't get that color again. 2JZs can do anything. They can do anything but make power NA. They don't seem to do that very well. Certainly a stock one doesn't. I would also like to see, and somebody, if you have a video or a link, send me a link where they took a stock bottom end 2JZ and tried to make power with it. Like they put ring gap in it, like the way that we do on an LS. They put ring gap in a stock one, and then started turning the boost up to see where that would get to. Enduro 500 to 600 horsepower with a turbo 5.3. Just go pick any 5.3 out of the wrecking yard and you're fine. Sticks, why are you wanting to cut the block down and how much are you doing it? If you change the deck height, depending on how much you take off, just like taking a bunch off the cylinder head, you get into the point where the intake manifold bolts don't want to line up. Distributor, if you have a distributor, can also be a problem. Unless you have a adjustable slip collar on it, then it can be not a problem. What happens with the distributor, if you bolt it down, then it loads the oil pump and you can burn stuff up. And that's not good. That's why the adjustable collar is kind of nice. And that's also one of the things that you take a look at when you're first assembling the engine and mocking everything up. Mount the intake manifold, the heads in the intake manifold, and then mount the distributor, and then make sure that you have there's got to be a little bit of play there. It needs to be surface is all. Yeah, if you just take a minimum cut, that's not a problem. If you're talking about taking 3 or 4 or 5 thousandths off of it, it's not an issue at all. You want to make sure that the piston isn't out of the hole already. In most cases, other than an LS, you normally don't have that. Usually the piston's down in the hole. So if you take a little bit off the deck surface, it's usually fine. And, up to 5 thousandths is not going to be an issue. Sticks, how deep are the pits in that thing? So you'll want to look at that, but usually the deck surfaces can be cleaned up. We almost always do 1 or 2 thousandths cut. I think we did that on a couple of the big bang motors too. I did it because I wanted like a fresh sealing surface. I didn't want that part of it to be the problem, with head gasket sealing for when we were trying to just turn the boost up and make lots and lots of power. I didn't want that to be a limitation. Oh, look, we blew a head gasket out or whatever. As it turned out, that wasn't an issue at all. It was a connecting rod strength problem. And I don't know that I'm 100% convinced that I want to go back and look at the timing curves on those and see if maybe we could have run less timing and more boost and maybe done better. Oh, they're down pretty good. Yeah, have new aluminum heads and want a good seal. Yeah, just make sure that the machine shop will be able to tell you. They'll be able to tell you, oh, that's a couple thousandths. That's just a cleanup, just a skim, and that'd be fine. Cryo treat the stock rods. That's not necessary at 600 horsepower. Richard, have you messed with BMW B58s? I have not. But I watched who is it? Steph Papadakis maybe did some stuff, I think, on that BMW motor, and they made a lot of power with it. I think part of the problem with those BMWs is the engine bay is a limited amount of space, right? I remember looking at a couple of the inline 6-cylinder stuff in the BMW chassis, and there wasn't a whole bunch of room to put turbos in there. Not that you couldn't do what other people do and put it in the passenger seat, and then duct it through the firewall and put a big intercooler in there, and then route it back in. Yeah, he does good stuff. He's got a cool shop, and they've got a nice setup. He's got a nice, and he does a good job too. He does a good job on his videos. He's a sharp guy. He's a OG racer. He's been doing it a long time. Wasn't a whole lot of room in my V10. Yeah, probably not. Those V10s are cool. Both the M5 and the M6. Those are definitely cool. Two more minutes. Then I must do another video. And I also have to plug this thing in because this is not cooperating. There we go. Come on, cooperate. There we go. And then what are you connected to? Oh, you're my light. I need that. The V10s are cool. Because isn't the V10, isn't that like a 500 horsepower motor? On a 6.9 liter diesel for $75 US. I'll be getting it soon. What are you going to put the 6.9 liter diesel in? Yours made 467 wheel horsepower. That's good. What did it have done to it? Did you do a tune on it? Did they do headers and stuff? I can't imagine what BMW V10 headers would cost. Oh, an F350. Okay. Cuckoo. Oh, you didn't do anything to it? That was stock? Nice. That's pretty sporty. V10 headers start at $4,500. Yeah. Sean, did you ever see any testing on them? What kind of power did they gain? $4,500. That you could run boost on the motor for that, and we know boost is going to add more than headers do. Intake headers, tune V10s make 600. Wow. Blue collar, good luck. What you got to figure out if there's something's hitting, man. You just got to figure out what it is. Is a valve hitting a piston? Sometimes I've had issues where the piston comes up and hit a head gasket. Actually, the head gasket overhung the bore. Just a mistake on my part. That happens. In fact, I've had one where we did that and it actually ran, but it kept hitting the intake or hitting the head gasket every time it made a noise, and it would be bad if it would eventually break something. That's what happens when you put together a whole bunch of these things. And you make mistakes. And the ESS supercharged one. What supercharger are they using on those? V10 stuff is cool. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I don't know, go watch the last video that we posted. And I got another one going up today.